Chancellor, Deputy Lieutenant, graduates and guests. Lucy Meacock is a name that everyone in the North West knows. They may see her on screens, they may follow her on Twitter or Instagram. Lucy consistently champions the North West communities, the underdogs, and those that need journalism's support and rigour. She knows instinctively that stories need strong, authentic and impassioned voices to get them out into the media. Last year, Lucy celebrated her 30th anniversary of presenting ITV's Granada Reports, the North West's flagship ITV news programme, a great achievement on so many levels. Winning 2 BAFTAs with ITV's Granada Reports team, as well as many Royal Television Society awards, it is a great accolade for regional news and highlights the strength of Lucy's work as both journalist and presenter. Lucy the journalist is open, ambitious, considered, accurate, robust, honest and resilient. But what about the person behind the presenter and the investigative journalist? Growing up in Chester from the age of 6, Lucy has made the North West her home for the last 30 years after working as an investigative journalist and reporter in Wales, the North East and London. All of these experiences have certainly shaped her life and enabled her to be the person she is today. Aged 8, Lucy wrote her first newspaper on a second-hand typewriter, and by the time she was 14, her determination to fight for the underdog had begun to influence what she wanted to become: a campaigner, a supporter and a storyteller, a journalist. She was extremely close to her father, a scientist and an academic. He had a huge influence on her, teaching her to continually consider both sides and to never take anything at face value. She has kept his advice close at heart throughout her career. Lucy's parents both died when she was only in her 20s. This shaped her dramatically. She talks about wanting someone to feel proud of her, as only your parents can. And this person in the end was herself. She has been her biggest critic, and yet she openly acknowledges her strengths and her determination to be an excellent journalist. And by this, she means being a journalist who fights for justice, campaigning and giving people from all backgrounds a voice and a platform from which to tell their stories, stories that perhaps otherwise would not be heard. Lucy has the people and the communities of the North West at heart, and at the heart of everything she does. And her ambition is to discover the truth, and this is palpable. Lucy has empathy, and like so many of the world's best journalists, she never gives up. Never taking things at face value, she has the great skill of being able to listen, a skill that she believes has enabled her to gain the trust of so many people over the years. And she's also never afraid to ask the questions that others are wanting to ask. Lucy has played a big part in keeping so many significant North West human stories alive, from the Hillsborough disaster and the cockle pickers of Morecambe Bay to the Manchester bomb in 2017. Lucy has always been determined that the people who have suffered are never forgotten. Without her dogged determination, this might not have been so. In 1984, whilst working in the North East as a reporter for Tyne Tees News, she covers the miners' strike, and it was here that her father's advice of always considering both sides kept her on track. The miners' strike was the biggest story of the decade, and working so closely with all the communities involved, it had a massive impact on Lucy, both as a journalist and as a person. She has never been afraid to challenge the politicians in a way that can derail them just when they think they are only taking part in a small regional news type of interview. Once, having lulled David Cameron into a false sense of security, she challenged him on air when he was visiting the region, asking, or more accurately stating, "It seems that you only visit the north when there is a general election." When Lucy began presenting Granada's ITV's Upfront with Tony Wilson, she admits that she was slightly nervous of the Anthony H. Wilson figure. But when he signed off to the audience on the very first live pilot show with, "So that's it from me and the lady, good night," as soon as they were off air, she responded, "Do not ever do that again." Aghast and puzzled, Tony asked what she meant, and she replied, A, never call me a lady again, and B, if I want to say good night, I will say good night. Do not say it for me. From there on in, they went on to have a fantastic working relationship, and she cites Tony Wilson as being the only other person she has met with an intellect equal to that of her father. Lucy is extremely proud of the way Granada ITV covered Hillsborough and has huge respect for the work that Jimmy McGovern and Katie Jones produced. When others had perhaps lost the impetus to keep running with the story, Lucy did not. She kept beating the drum. On the day of the Hillsborough Independent Panel ruling, ITV's Granada Reports programme came live from Liverpool St George's Hall. This was the day that the panel would be announcing that many lives could have been saved if the Hillsborough disaster had been handled differently. Incredibly, some might say, Trevor Hicks, the father of the 2 young girls who lost their lives at Hillsborough, gave his extended interview that day to Lucy, despite all the world's press being there. Why? Because it was Lucy who had continually persevered to keep this story in the news and in the people's minds, and Trevor knew this. Lucy believes that the spirit of Granadaland is the spirit of the North West and its people, but it is also her spirit and her energy that enables these stories to be heard. And it is for this reason that we are so pleased to welcome Lucy here today, championing new talent and supporting the next generation of journalists, producers and filmmakers. Lucy is always keen to emphasise that it is on the one hand the most demanding and tough job you could ever choose to do, whilst on the other hand the very best career you could ever hope to have. Lucy, the person, is open, ambitious, considered, accurate, robust, honest and resilient. Chancellor, I present for the degree of Doctor of Letters, honoris causa, Lucy Meacock.
This university, I now pronounce you Doctor of Letters, honoris causa. Congratulations. Well done. Well done. Nice congrats. I'm going to give this to you now. I'm going to turn around and I'm going to smile at you. Well done. Well done.
Heavens, not sure how to follow that. Well, first of all, wow, how smart do you all look? I mean, really smart. You've got dressed up for the day, you're all incredibly bright, you've worked so hard for today, so I've got to start by congratulating all of you. You've got the world at your feet now and you can do so much with those degrees. You can change your world, you can change your bit of the world. Now all you've got to do is go out and do that. So first of all, congratulations. Well done on all of the hard work that you've put in. Well done to everyone at Salford University for all of the hard work that they've put into those degrees as well. The tradition today, I think, is that I try to pass on some advice to you. I was going to tell some jokes, but I thought the outfit was probably amusing enough. I won't be wearing it on Granada Reports. I'd like to start really by saying that although you've had a long, hard slog to get to this point probably, the learning doesn't stop today. It goes on every day. And I can tell you in 30 years of doing the job that I do, I have learnt something new every day. Because no 2 days are ever the same, no 2 stories are ever the same, no 2 people are ever the same. And that means that you're continually learning all the time. If you think about it, when I started out, I hate to admit this, but there were no mobile phones, there was no internet, no social media. How the heck did we survive without that? And that's obviously a massive source for stories now. But you think how much we've had to learn, how much our lives have changed in that time, and you think how much it's going to change for you in the next 30 years and how much you're going to have to keep up with and learn. So the learning has to go on all the time. Now, my lovely dad, who got a mention before, who was a very bright man, used to say to me that you learn more by listening than by talking. I think he told me that because I used to talk quite a lot. And sometimes I think it is learning to listen that's the hardest lesson of all. Listening to your parents or your supporters today when they're trying to, warn you about danger or heartbreak or disappointment. Maybe when they're trying to tell you stories, I think there are some grandparents here as well, when they're trying to tell you stories about when they were young. They'll probably do that today. And I tell you to listen to those stories, because one day, if you don't, you will really regret it. Everyone has a really good story to tell. And whenever anyone comes into Granada Reports, if we don't get a good interview or a good story out of them, the only person who's failed is me, because they've got that story. If I don't find it, then that's my failing, not theirs. When you start work as well, maybe listen to some of your colleagues. I've got some of my colleagues with me today who I have enormous respect for. And they're probably thinking, yeah, listening. She didn't do much of that. She does a lot of talking. But actually, I do listen to them as well. And they have great advice and they have great skills. And you have to listen to people with views that oppose your own. You can't just listen to people who agree with you all the time. Because that's how we learn. It's how we learn to negotiate and compromise and move forward together. And as you referred to, in the political climate that we're in at the moment, we really need to work at that. Now, I know you've probably got great dreams here, quite rightly. And the other bit of advice I'd give you is don't let anyone stand in the way of those dreams. Sometimes it isn't easy, even when you've been in the business for a long time. Like when one of my bosses said, "You won't want to be on television when you're 40. What woman in her right mind would want to be on television over the age of 40? It wasn't a good day at the office. But I came back in the next day more determined than ever to hang on to the job that I love. And I'm still working for ITV and he isn't. So many of you, of course, are planning careers in television and radio and various different parts of the media. And I would say try to make television that's worth watching. Unpredictable, adventurous. The more unpredictable, the better. I think what I've always loved about Granada Reports is that it's a news programme with a heart. And it's made by people who have good hearts. And basically that means that when we see a victim of injustice, and it is a team, it's not just me, when we see a victim of injustice, we naturally want to help them. When we see a story that we think might make the Northwest smile, we want to tell it. And if we think the Northwest is missing out on something, well, we want to campaign and fight for it. Just an example, really, of the variety in a week, I can tell you that this week, on Tuesday night, we had a 39% share of the audience, which, given how many outlets there are now for various different news programmes, is a pretty good achievement by a regional news programme, 39% of the available audience. And then last night we took the brave decision to do the programme almost all about mental health and suicide. It was a really hard watch. Ricky Hatton spoke about feeling suicidal, how he dealt with that, how he got through that. It was a really tough watch. So it isn't all just about getting people to watch what you do, but there are some stories that you have to tell. You have a responsibility to tell those stories. And last night, until really late last night, there was a lot of social media discussion. And I saw people on Twitter and on Facebook hook up with each other, someone perhaps saying that they were feeling really down, and someone else saying, I used to feel like that, and this is how I dealt with it. And I feel that that was a good sense of achievement, and I felt that we'd really done something worthwhile yesterday. I don't know what the audience figures for that will be. They probably will not be as high as they were the previous night, but it was a really important programme to do. Our programme's always about people, about the courageous, inspirational, gifted and funny people who live in the Northwest, and some of the bad ones as well that we have to see brought to justice. So that, I think, is why I'm really proud of it. I hope you don't mind if I take this opportunity to say a few thank yous, because there are some really important people to me here today. So I'd like to say thanks to Fiona, Linda and Val, who are great buddies of mine. I couldn't get through my job without really good support from the people I think of as family, because they are like family to me. So I can't tell you how much your support means to me. I'm also pleased that one person in particular is here today. I think of him as a great friend, and he's a great co-presenter, the best that you could ever wish for. I think we make a pretty good team at Granada Reports, and everywhere I go, people ask me, is he as lovely as he seems? So before you ask me, yes, Tony Morris is as lovely as he seems. And it was a very good day for me, the day that Tony Morris walked into Granada Reports. So thank you for being so much fun to work with. He's also a very modest man and will hate me for doing that. I'd also like to thank my boss, Lucy West, because she keeps us all under control and she does all the tough stuff at the top, which means that we can get on with doing the jobs that we love. So thanks for that, Lucy. Thanks too to one of our most senior producers. These are names to listen out for, because any job applications or emails sent, they won't thank me for that probably. But they're really good and they will help if they can. One of our most senior producers is here today. A rare day off for him, one of the absolute best in the business, Andrew Rigby, not only because he's a top journalist who I admire enormously, but because he makes us laugh every day too. And finally, good message for you here. Teresa Mcmahon is with me today. Only 3 years ago, she graduated from Salford University. She is without doubt one of the keenest and most talented journalists in our newsroom, and she was sitting where you're sitting today. Lots of other very hard-working people on the team as well. In fact, they're all there doing tonight's programme while we're out having fun. I also want to share some words of wisdom from another great friend who's with me today, Carolyn Hughes, who runs a very successful PR company in Liverpool. When people talk to her about how lucky she is, she says, yeah, funny that. The harder I work, the luckier I get. That's worth remembering as well. It is absolutely true. You have to make some of your own luck in life. But if you get some luck, I think then you have a bit of a duty to pass some of it on. As I see it, you've all been lucky enough to study in the best and most creative part of the country. I hope you feel a sense of belonging here, that sense of belonging that I have to the Northwest. Now that's meant that I've always felt a duty to put something back into this region. I do hope that you will do the same, that you'll fly the flag, tell people what an exciting place this is. I'm sure many of you will go on to work in London, other parts of the UK, other parts of the world. But don't forget the time that you've had here, what you've learnt here, and one day come back to use your talents well. Or if you choose to stay, and I hope that many of you will, after all, we are at Media City, so there's an awful lot going on here. Stay here and be creative so that you can create the jobs that we really need here. So just to recap, learn something new every day if you can, listen more, try to put something back, and try to do something that you're proud of. I am so proud of Granada Reports. It's been an enormous privilege for me to serve the people of the Northwest. I've interviewed many thousands of people over those years, a rich diversity of characters with an astonishing range of stories to tell. I feel very privileged to have served the Northwest, and I hope people will look back one day and they'll think that I served them well. It has been an honour, and for today's honour, Salford University, I thank you.